Hi, thanks for joining everyone. I wanted to do this video on the topic of building meta chains that act recursively in generic tables. That is something that a lot of people probably don't realize you can do, but it's very useful when you have architectures that have repeating patterns, and that exists a lot of times with structural decompositions or functional decompositions or port decompositions. Now, this can be done in relation maps as well, but it's neat to do this in tables and understand how to do this. So let's say you had a very simple architecture like this and we wanted to do a structural decomposition or show that structural decomposition in a table. Typically what you would do is you would go in and look at all of the blocks, but then they would each have their own row here, but you wouldn't really see that hierarchy of the structure and how that decomposes. What you can do is you can use the block as the element type, and then for the scope, you actually want to scope this to a specific block, not any type of block. You could start this scope at a package, but I'd recommend doing this with a specific block that you have in mind that you'd like to see the decomposition of. So in this case, it's a system block specifically, and that's this block here. Now the next step is to actually go in and adjust the filter. If you open that up, there's an option here to build hierarchy. That is what allows this meta chain to act recursively for the scope. So if you select this option for build hierarchy, and then you have a pattern such as a meta chain that repeats recursively, what you'll see is that can then expand open. So this can be done for lots of different types of patterns. This is one specifically for structural decompositions. So what you could do is go from the block to its parts, and then the parts would be part properties and then their type, and the type is a block. So that pattern repeats back at the next block that would then look at its part and go to its part property and type again. So that continues on forever until you have no more decomposition. And then what you can do is say, okay, and now you have this plus sign as an option that then expands recursively. Notice we have our hierarchy here. There are a few options up here as far as how this is displayed. You can either do a complete tree or a compact tree. So that can adjust how this is actually displayed in the table. And of course, that would be the list option there, and that's what we didn't want to have in. So if we go to that complete tree, notice this keeps breaking down in accordance with our hierarchy or our structural decomposition. At that point, you can then do meta chains off of each one of these. So let's say, for instance, we wanted to see all of the owned operations of these. You can see how those will still show all of the resulting meta chains or queries based off of these, but it's nice to be able to see this hierarchy in a table as well. So those can then tuck back in and you can expand that. As I mentioned, this is the same way that a relation map works. That's why typically with relation maps, you start those with a specific element, and then those meta chains that you build act recursively from that point. So some other examples of when you may want to do something like this would possibly be with a functional decomposition. In this case, I have a high level activity, and then it actually has an activity diagram with some nodes such as call behavior actions that call other activities, and then these go on quite a while as well. Let's look at the meta chain for that. So notice this is again done by using that filter option here, and then you can use the meta chain. You always want to select build hierarchy. And then in this case, we're looking at activities and their nodes, and almost everything in an activity diagram is a node. So then we down select that to call behavior actions in this case, and then the behavior of the call behavior action, which is similar to the type, but it's considered the behavior. So then that would then start back at an activity, and that's how that acts recursively as well. So another option or another idea that you may want to look at is something like a port decomposition. In this case, I'm starting with sub A interface, and then that is typed by this interface block here that has nested proxy ports that are typed by these interface blocks as well. So looking at that, we're again starting with the element type here being a proxy port, and then the scope is that specific proxy port. Then looking at the meta chain for this, it goes from the port to the type, which is the interface block, and then we're looking at all of its own ports, and the ports would then go back up to being that proxy port. Again, keep in mind, you always want to select that option for build hierarchy, and you don't see that if you're doing a typical meta chain. You don't see this option. This is only available in that scope option that you have there. So let's say I just wanted to start some new custom column in here. Notice you do not have the option to build the hierarchy, and it's because this is only available in that scope filter there. So something really neat that you can use, and it makes generic tables nice and tidy where you can simply expand things and collapse them back. I hope this has been insightful for you guys. If you have any questions about this, please feel free to reach out.